Yeah. Okay.
No, I think it looks great. It really, really does. Yeah. I was actually, so we usually have an annual mayor's luncheon, and we haven't had one in the last 2 years. And I was going to reach out to Betsy and them, and I talked to former Mayor Holmes yesterday, and he's all for it. So we're trying to do it again, and then I'll have someone get pictures of it.
I was just going to suggest maybe Amy could get a photo.
Yeah, she got a photo of the last ones.
We all good?
Did she? Okay.
All right. Let me go ahead and call this meeting of Planning and Economic Development Committee to order. Would you please call the roll?
Councilor Bell?
Here.
Councilor Hirsch? Here. Mayor Smith?
Yeah.
We are all here. First item on the agenda is the review and approval of the minutes from the March 24th meeting.
Motion approved.
Motion to approve. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Minutes from the March 24th meeting has been approved as presented. Our next item is a public comment section. It's the opportunity for anyone who wishes to speak before the committee. If anyone is here, do we have anybody sign up specifically? Is there anybody here wish to speak for public comments? All right. Hearing none, I will close the public comments and move on to the first agenda item, which is rezoning 2022-12, a request to reapprove the development plan for a planned unit development of 22.7 acres of land at 301 and 441 Linden Drive. This is low-density residential with a PUD overlay. All right, presented by Tim. Tim, I know we've seen this before.
You have seen an
Fill us in.
iteration of it, yes. So I have with me Chris Moon, who's going to co-present. He is with Greenway Engineering,
Okay.
applicant on the request. Actually, I think it's a request of a group out of Chicago, but they are providing the engineering services. So we're going to split the duties here. On the screen, you can see two images of the site. One is of the on the left there when the school structure was still in place. When this came to you previously. Since then, on the right-hand side, they have subdivided the property into two separate parcels. The new parcel at 301 is the lower terrace where the athletic field was. And you can also see that they have made progress in terms of tearing down the school structure. If you go up there, you'll see that they have some silt fencing. So there has been progress made toward this PUD. And that shows up in kind of a now and then image here, looking from Linden Drive, top image showing the school in place, and then the bottom where you have the views across to the medical center and the North Mountain in the background. Not going to belabor comprehensive plan. It's the same as was with the earlier plan, even though we have the updated plan now. It still calls for this as a redevelopment site. And a couple of things that are shown there, the traffic circles show up on the curves there of Linden Drive and then up where Linden intersects with Caroline. And then it also shows a preference to have connectivity to the Winchester Medical Center campus there, either Campus Boulevard or, as depicted here, the North Sector Court that provides access up to where Shenandoah University has their facility. Turn it over to Chris now to give you a overview of the updated information.
Sure. The updated plan that is shown on the screen, it still incorporates 303 dwelling units. That was the original approval. So that's a 13.28 dwelling unit per acre density. As Tim mentioned, the lower portion of the site, which had been the athletic fields, is about 9.65 acres, and that's where the active adult component of the project will be located. That's a total of 160 apartment units and integrated open space. And then, of course, on the upper level where the school itself used to sit, that's approximately 13.15 acres, and that's the market rate single-family attached component of the project, and that will consist of 143 dwelling units, and that's a mix of conventional townhouses, stacked townhouses, as well as duplex units as well. Thank you. So the image on the screen, this was the originally approved GDP. And I think it's important to take a moment to pause here just to indicate that a significant change from the first iteration to what is before you today is the elimination of the potential connector roadway to the medical center campus. There had been a lot of work undertaken to try to make that happen, but that was something that wasn't able to come to fruition. So that has been removed. Next, thank you. You're doing a great job. Moving me along, Tim. This is great. The next slide is is kind of a close-up view of the active adult component. Again, this is 160 active adult apartment units, integrated amenity areas, and includes 240 parking spaces. That's both surface and integrated with the building and below grade. And these are just some of the, I think they're consistent with what the prior submission had included in terms of the elevations of the apartment buildings. For the townhouse component of the project, again, this is 143 total units. This image on the screen is what was presented to the Planning Commission and considered by the Planning Commission. And it's slightly different than what is in front of you today, which is this image. Specifically, of the 143 dwelling units, this particular concept before you has 8 additional stacked townhouse units compared to what the Planning Commission considered. So the Planning Commission saw a proposal with 48 stacked townhouse units. This proposal includes 56. That's down from the original approval, which had 76 stacked townhouse units. So it's more of the conventional towns, a couple more of the duplex units along Linden Drive, and again, this is still at that 143 total number.
And Chris, can you just confirm the orientation of which are in that GDP, which are the stacked or the interior ones?
Correct. The stacked units are basically the 4 rows that are internal within the site, and they have labeling, that has the STA-TH, where all the others aren't labeled in that same way. But you're correct that those are all internalized. And so the total count, the breakdown is that the 56 stacked townhouse units, 61 conventional townhouse units, and 26 duplex units as well. And these are just some of the original perspective exhibits that were provided by the applicant, fundamentally consistent with what is still in front of you today.
While we're on this one, in the upper image here, you can kind of see those taller structures toward the center. Those were the 3 buildings that were going to be, actually 4 buildings, I take it back, that were going to be stacked. So this was what had been presented back last year when they got approval. And then in the foreground, there are the 2-unit townhouses that are 2 stories high. So there's a progression from the conventional single-family homes on the opposite side of Linden Drive in the foreground of this aerial view, and then the 2-story, 2-unit townhouses across the street from them. Then behind those are the 3-story conventional townhouses, and then further removed from the single-family homes are those 4-story units. So there's a progression of height, so that we don't have a very tall building right across the street from a single family. And this was something that the neighbors there on the east side of the street were very concerned about. They wanted a unit that was of a scale. The building itself was kind of scaled to the scale of a single family house, so it wasn't a big long row of 7 or 8 townhouses, but instead just 2. And so the applicant has updated the proposal now that they're looking at these 24-foot wide 2-unit buildings. And in this example, they're showing a shared driveway, total of 20-foot wide. We're still kind of liquid on this, working with the applicant. They were going to try to get you an updated elevation today, and we're not able to do that. But That's really the main focus at this point in terms of the updated exhibits. Is we want to make sure that this is compatible in scale. And so some of the earlier proposals had a very disproportionate percentage of the ground floor, basically looked like a garage with a house above it. And so we wanted to stay away from that and do something that had a higher percentage of ground floor residential space, very much like the house directly across the street from there.
And these are just some more of the original elevations, and these in particular are for the townhouse, the conventional townhouse units that are envisioned. And of course the side and the rear elevations, for the conventional towns. Let's see here, and this is of course the 2/2 or stacked townhouse units that are proposed for the interior of the site. And they don't have quite the same amount of information for the rear and fronts, but you'll see the rear loaded garages, for the stacked. So they'll all be, any stacked unit will be alley served, which to allow for that access.
The nice thing is on the front elevation, you actually get a front door that has some greenery to it, so it doesn't look like just a continuous row of hardscape.
Right.
Right, just again to reiterate, a few of the key changes which are highlighted on the screen. Again, the unit count, the total number of stacked units is up from what the Planning Commission saw a couple weeks ago, but is down from the original approval. And also the overall number of parking spaces, the Planning Commission, or of on-street parking spaces, the Planning Commission saw 43 with what they saw recently. We were proposing 41. It's a reflection of kind of the ongoing revisions and refinements to the layout, that's the case. And of course, in total, I mentioned the age-restricted parking, but the total site will have 581 parking spaces. Again, a total of 303 units and a 13.28 dwelling unit per acre overall density. And just from the math perspective, for the single-family attached units, it averages out to about 2.4 parking spaces per unit. So in addition to on the lot or on site, as well as on street and other parking opportunities.
And that's a big point, because the lower terraces, the age restricted, and we expect that more of the residents there, those 1 and 2 bedroom units, will have just one unit.
And finally, I think it's an important revision or refinement as to the open space of the site. In particular, with the original PUD approval, I believe it was about a 43% overall open space, and that was somewhat acknowledging the public park that's included with the proposal. It's 2.39 acres in size. But with the Planning Commission's input, there was an interest in seeing the overall open space number meet the minimum of 45% for the PUD district. So we did go back and revisit the layout. I know we had suggestions of narrowing, parking driveways and some other refinements, and some of the other adjustments allowed us to eliminate, an alley and some other things that freed up more open space. So now we're up to a total of 47% approximately in total open space, and that's inclusive of the park area.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's certainly an enhancement that's come through the revision.
And just the last 2 slides, recall with the original approval there was kind of a hand-drawn phasing plan, wherein the active adult would be the first phase, along with the neighborhood park and just a small number of the townhouses out closer to Linden. The applicant has provided an updated phasing plan now that clearly indicates that the road that would be over toward where the traffic circle connects Linden Drive and Caroline, that is also included in the active adult. So that's why you see that kind of strange finger extending out to the lower right corner there to come out to the intersection. That allows that phase to stand on its own with 2 points of access for emergency particularly in terms of fire and rescue. So we feel, and they also did not want to sub-phase the townhouse. So they basically are saying that the neighborhood park and all of the townhouses would come on board as a single second phase. And then lastly, this is a reapproval of a PUD, which I don't think we've had one of these in maybe 20, 25 years. So there's some nuances here in terms of the process for council approving this. And the ordinance, section 13-4, specifically calls out a process for reapproval of expired development plans. So this plan was originally approved by council back in February of 2021. They realized that they had allowed that approval to lapse by not filing the first of multiple site plans by that date in 2022. But it also afforded them an opportunity to come back and make some of these revisions that you just heard. And so the process outlined in the zoning ordinance is that it gets treated like a conditional use permit instead of an ordinance. So it's still a rezoning proposal, but it is handled from the state code and the local ordinance as if it were a conditional use. And the main implication there is it doesn't have the first and second reading. It instead goes directly to council for a public hearing and then potentially an action, very much like a conditional use permit does. As it turns out, if you were inclined to forward this to council today, it would not appear on your first agenda, council agenda, in May, because we have to advertise that public hearing at least 2 weeks, and that deadline has already passed. So it would be the May 24th council meeting instead of the earlier meeting. And this did come out of Planning Commission. They recommended it on a nearly unanimous vote, but they did recommend that at least a bike and pedestrian connection be agreed to by this applicant if Valley Health or Winchester Medical Center, whichever entity controls the decision about an access easement over to the medical center. If they agree to it, we don't want to have a situation where they say yes, and then these folks say, oh, well, we have no obligation to do it. That we feel that's going to help to mitigate traffic on the lower section of Linden Drive. If you think about people who are either customers or employees at the medical campus, including Shenandoah University up in the back, they would have to come down Linden Drive, make the turn onto Amherst Street, make another turn into the campus. That's a little easier than having to come out of the hospital, wait to make a left turn onto Amherst Street, and then make another left turn onto Linden Drive on their return home. So if we can get some of those trips either allowed by bike or pedestrian, or maybe even ultimately some kind of a private interparcel vehicular connection, that helps us in terms of managing traffic on Linden and Amherst. Glad to take any questions.
Okay. Any questions from the committee?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Chris, since you're sitting here, you're the target. It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
So the whole reason, the main reason that we're here again, because we were very excited about this from the start, is because of the deadlines that we missed. And I know surrounding this, at the time, there was a lot of public comments about it, and more so of those who weren't in favor of it, but they were, not that they weren't in favor of it, but they were more concerned about the traffic impact that it would have. Here we are again, and I see that you have, Tim, that you have pulled up something from 25 years ago that hasn't been seen by any of us. But what's to say if this gets approved and move forward, that we won't be in the same boat again in a year or 2 years?
But
And the reason I'm putting this out there is because of your partners that you're working with. We have a couple of projects, and I didn't want to go there to attach some of the projects that they have, but I have to because it's becoming a common theme. And it just concerns me that we approve something and then we don't see anything happen.
sure, and I appreciate the perspective and the concern. I think all I can really speak to is that they are making headway. They're making progress with key elements of what's necessary for this development to occur. As Tim pointed out, the actual demolition of the middle school building itself, which involved an awful lot of environmental remediation, things of that nature. There has been a significant amount of site design that's been underway, despite the fact that we haven't gotten the site plan in yet, which is obviously what put us here. So I think there is progress being made. I would say within a month or 2 months of having a mass grading plan submitted as well with the site plan. So I feel that progress is being made from what I can see, at Greenway and the work that HDP has us pursuing. So I can't speak for them, and I can't exactly speak for why they allowed the lapse to occur. But all indications are that this is moving forward and is very much a real project. And my expectation is that I won't be sitting in front of you and a year or 2 years from now having a similar conversation. I think the project will be much further along.
Tim, there are processes and steps that have to happen as they go along. So within that, it seems that since this was last before council, like how many steps or processes were missed?
So, as noted in the staff report, I had some highlighted text there. They have 1 year before they have to just submit. They don't even have to secure an approval of, but just submit at least the site plan for the first phase. They know that they're going to do the 160 age-restricted units first. One of the other things that they have made progress on that I know of is that they now have a manager and a developer of that. They did not have an identified company willing to take on the 160 unit age-restricted product. So now they're working with a definite developer of that. So that's most likely the next step. Presumably Greenway would be preparing and submitting that site plan. And I don't think they're going to make this mistake twice.
I hope not.
Kim, you have a question?
I was concerned about this having to come back as well, but we'll trust that it's moving forward now. I did want to, because as you were going through this, if something can get worked out with regards to a path or a trail or something, I mean, I just think that, from the city standpoint with the Green Circle Trail and connectivity, and I just think what's going to end up happening there is that people who do go to the wellness center or work at Valley Health, they're just going to cut a trail through there. So might as well take the time to really designate a specific area, because people will just use it, I think. So I would totally support whoever the planning commissioner member was that brought that up. I think that's a really important piece to the connection between this large development and Valley Health, which will hopefully have employees housed in this location. So,
All right. I'm going to follow up on that as well. I'm not going to harp on the let's not do this again approach, but the assumption is, based on the slide I'm looking at right now, where that proposed partial access is now not part of the plan, that was removed through dialogue and understanding that it's just not going to happen. Has there been any dialogue about pedestrian and bicycle access?
I think there has, from what
Okay.
I've understood from recent conversations with HDP, and I think that, what I think everyone has mentioned and the Planning Commission put forward, I think there's an openness for sure to making that happen. I think they'd like to see it happen. They see the relationship and kind of the energy that can be driven, by that type of connection. So I would say that, that seems like, they're very much aligned with where the Planning Commission was coming from, and I think from what I'm hearing from you all as well. And I'll certainly convey, that back to them, that this is something that would be really more an expected piece of the puzzle as it moves forward to council.
Yeah, and I would say even so far as having a clearer understanding of, if HDP engages with Valley Health or Winchester Medical Center to secure this, we also kind of want to know who's constructing it, who's paying for it, how that's going to happen. We don't want Valley Health to hold it hostage because, well, I'll let you do it, but I won't contribute to it. I think getting their agreement to have it constructed is a win, and should be viewed that way. Questions that I have specifically, all right, so the age-restricted component is going to be basically an apartment complex or apartment building. That is going to be rental.
That's my understanding.
And under unified management.
Yes.
All right. The phase 2, which is all single-family housing types, be townhomes, duplexes, and stacked. Those are for sale units.
Yes, they will be for
Okay.
sale units. Yes.
And then so the stacked are what, under condominium?
Yeah, the stacked units, the ones that are not from the ground to the sky, they'll have to do a condo association for those, whether
Okay.
they do the entire development as condo or whether they have a conventional townhouse lots subdivided.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know that yet, but there will definitely be, some decision soon as to whether they're going to proceed with a major subdivision, because that will have to come back to the Planning Commission for a public hearing.
Sure.
And to council for a vote. And Mr. Eisenach is here. There's going to have to be a decision as to which of any of these streets are accepted as public streets versus private streets. So on the plan, they are identifying the main spine road that parallels Linden there coming down to the neighborhood park as a public street, but that's a decision that's yet to be reviewed in detail by staff. The default is if we don't agree to it as a public street, then it becomes a private street that the developer maintains.
They maintain it, but also then they can't create these simple parcels, right? Under a private street.
There is a way to plat parcels on a private street as long as that private street meets city street standards.
Got it.
So 50-foot right of way width and at least a 27-foot wide travel way.
Typically, yes.
Okay.
But they will, just to clarify, all of the streets that are around the stacked townhouses, including those driveway alleys, those will all be private. We will not maintain any of those.
Okay. And at the Planning Commission, I think the applicant who was present at the time made reference to they're very close to finalizing an agreement on the developer for the residential component. Basically, this parcel would be sold to whoever the residential developer would be, and then they would take it from there, including all the planning.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
If we approve this under a PUD, it basically needs to stay in close conformity to what was approved.
It's an excellent question. The zoning ordinance allows the planning director to approve a lot of variations from the plan, including architectural layout, floor plans, landscape plan, everything. There's criteria in terms of not increasing the unit count, not increasing traffic by some percentage, like 2%, and not reducing green space. So as long as those three things don't happen, it doesn't have to come back to City Council.
Okay.
Generally, I'm going to look at it and say, if they've modified the buildings and the unit count so much, I'm going to suggest that it at least come back to you as an advisory kind of thing, and
Okay.
get some guidance from you as to whether you feel they've deviated too far.
And does there, again, it's looking at this with the understanding of it being for sale units, does it change anything if it's all condoed or just the stacks are condoed, but everything else is going to be subject to, I mean, obviously a condo, you're subject to condominium association requirements. Everything else would be under a homeowners association?
Yes, the other townhouses. The
Okay.
park, you know, that the intent there is that it gets dedicated to the city after they approve it. So
Okay.
that becomes public land.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to see that that at least in the current presentation, we're not, you know, right at or just below the green space requirement. I know that was an issue that came up at Planning Commission, that 45% being the minimum required, you were 44. So that's good. I see no issues with this. Again, I appreciate the do-over, but would like to have some very concrete feedback regarding the pedestrian access. To me, that was raised in the approval process previously. So would be hopeful that was taken with some level of seriousness. All right. Any other questions?
A motion to move forward with approval.
A motion to forward with a recommendation for approval. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, so that will move forward to the recommendation for approval with the understanding that this would go on the May 24th agenda, coupled with a public hearing. Or
Correct, it'll go on the May 24th agenda with a public hearing. If at that time it is council's decision, maybe some of these questions haven't been answered, it could be continued, but we would go ahead and have the public hearing on
Sure.
May 24th.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. All right, next item on the agenda, Alfredo's going to walk us through an ordinance to amend 18-7-1.7A pertaining to available area for use in primary and secondary downtown districts. What do we got, Alfredo?
Thank you, Chairman Bell. So before the committee is a privately sponsored text amendment by Mr. Ron McGeehee, owner of the monument in downtown Winchester. Text amendment is specifically for expanding the area available for use for outdoor dining areas in the primary and secondary assessment districts of Winchester, only those two districts. So for example, primary assessment district would be along the 11th Street Walking Mall, and then the secondary assessment district and those surrounding areas between Braddock, Cameron, Piccadilly, and Court Street, along with some additional alleyways. So the way it stands right now in the zoning ordinance, section 18-7-17 says that the width that an applicant, that a potential business owner or tenant of a property can use in either the primary or secondary assessment district is limited to the width of the individual storefront. So that means that if there's a business abutting the public right-of-way, not privately owned land, but public right-of-way, that the use that can be granted to them must not exceed the width of the building. In some instances, there are buildings that are not as wide as the lot. The lot is actually wider than the building itself. Most of the buildings, and I don't want to say all of them, most of the buildings, probably 90% of them in downtown, the building is as wide as the lot just because of the way they were built. In this situation, again, there are some lots that can use that land in the public right-of-way abutting their property that is still owned by the city but covered under the primary secondary assessment districts. And so what this will do is, again, allow them to expand their use still within their lot in the secondary district. So staff did an analysis just looking through this, provided a map. As you can see, the areas with a red number are those with outdoor dining areas. And those in yellow are lots wider than the actual building itself. This is South Loudoun, this is North Loudoun. I think there's a total of 8 or 9 lots that would benefit from this in the primary assessment district. This is not in the secondary assessment district. Outside of the primary assessment district, which is Loudoun Street from Piccadilly to Cork, I believe the only one that has an outdoor dining area is the restaurant on the corner of Braddock and Piccadilly. Other than that, I am not aware of any other businesses outside of the walking mall that have outdoor dining areas. So looking at this, here's an example.
There's two. George Washington is.
George Washington. And it may be, I think a portion of it is on the property and then a portion might be in the right of way. Yes, sir.
Right, and then Tropical Smoothie is the other one.
Right.
That's
Piccadilly and
And I think
Braddock.
lot is.
La Missois has a table.
They put out some
I
tables.
believe that's
I'm
for
not sure if those are for
decorations more
decoration.
than anything.
I don't think he serves out there.
At least that's not what we have approved for the records. So on the screen here is an example of what an outdoor dining area can look like and may be used per the zoning ordinance as is, and that's to the fence to the edge of the big building, in line with the edge of the brick building. The area expand all the way to the green canopy on the adjoining building is what a proposed text amendment would reflect. Again, that's noted that that property that would be used would only be the public right of way. If it's on private property, it would be under a normal zoning purview. Here's another view of it overhead, and this is what it would look like extending all the way to the edge of the property. And again, in this instance, this is property specific, but this would apply for any property in the downtown district. So I did have the fire marshal review the text amendment, see if he had any comments, concerns, questions. His main concern was to ensure that there's a minimum 16-foot fire lane available for use at all times. Based on what's out there now, this wouldn't necessarily change that. So in response to that, staff already sends all outdoor dining permits to the fire marshal for his review to ensure that where the location's at in reference to other improvements such as planters, etc., don't obstruct and limit that 16-foot fire lane. So this will be on a case-by-case basis. And going with the fire marshal, I believe there were 3 properties on the south side of the walking mall, that is South Boscawen. That's properties E and F on the screen that may affect that fire lane. But again, that's if they ever become a restaurant and they ever have an outdoor dining area, that'll be addressed at that time. Aside from that, the fire marshal had no other concerns. Speaking with the planning department, the one potential effect that this may have is what's called a canyon effect, where if you had restaurant uses along both sides of the Loudoun Street walking mall, you would essentially have a large canyon effect, a monotonous facade of just fences. And this would also, if it were to happen at any point in time, and this is even regardless of whether it's extended to lot width or not, because a lot of these businesses are already out to their lot width because the building is as wide as the lot. Limited refuge area for pedestrians and for emergency response vehicles needed to access the walking mall. So I did speak with the fire marshal. Your average fire engine is 8 to 10 feet wide, 16-foot wide minimum area for those vehicles. That leaves a few feet on each side. So the canyon effect is possible, but that would only be if, and it may be at some time in the future that if there were majority of restaurants along the walking mall and they also had all outdoor dining areas. And also they're required to have a minimum opening. So it is possible. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but staff at this point in time does not see that as an issue as it is currently, based on the way it's laid out. Also, with that, if at any point in time the zoning ordinance does allow the zoning administrator to revoke a permit should an applicant break any of those rules, not meeting the requirements. So there's also that avenue for, if there's ever a concern, a true valid concern, that either it can be scaled back, like an amended permit, or be revoked altogether. So I have the applicant here with me, he can provide more information on his text amendment.
The building at 186 North Loudon, the old Virginia National Bank, it has 4 planters in front of it. And at the corner, there's a fountain, and then there's another planter with about 4 feet between them. And then there's the big electric box that does the bollards there. And then there's about 8 feet to the next planter. And then there's about 12 feet between that planter and the biggest planter there. So there's just no space. Now, I asked to be able to remove the planters last year, and that didn't go over very good to get the space. But it's just to get more space so we can seat more people, hopefully generate more revenue.
Any questions by the committee?
I have a question. And I'm glad that Tim and Perry are here, because when we were redoing the mall and and we had the open house and we were looking at the design, there were, when we looked at the planners and the placement of everything, there were questions that came about if there was ever a change in use in some of the properties that are currently down here, let's say Wilkins and Patton's, and at that time we didn't even think about the bank at the time. But if there was ever a possible change in use where they were turning into a restaurant, what would they do about a patio? And so here we are. Because you wouldn't and you don't have the same spacing as the other places, because there's permanent structures there. The way that it looks now, and there is that concern about what you call the canyon effect or a tunnel effect, I can already see that just when I walk down to the espresso bar and just seeing all of these. I'm reminded of being in Charlottesville, where many of their patios aren't attached to the building. They're sort of outlets up there. So you can walk in between the restaurant and patio or on the main drag, but it's quite welcoming. Seeing so many fences up like that concerns me. So many patio fences. It doesn't look welcoming, and I know the reason that we have to have the fencing is because of ABC when we're serving alcohol. And I know that the ABC laws, they're very archaic and they haven't come up to the standards, but it's what we have to deal with right now. If we didn't have to have that, and we have better controls of alcohol control of who comes in, we'll have to worry about patio. Well, worry about fencing, and that would be a lot more presentable, but here we are again. I have concern about the fencing, but I do understand that you need more space for clients for the patio. My other concern is fire and rescue. I know that there has to be 16 feet, and is that 44 inches included in the 16 feet, or is that in addition?
So that would And again, this is just,
Because I know that once they pull up to a building, they need to be able to open up their doors and then open up the side panels where they can get to whatever they have to get to. Is there enough space for them and the actual firefighter?
right, sir. Yeah, that's a good question. So the 44 inches applies to specifically the opening to get into the fenced area. That's not a 44 inches encroaching already from the fenced area. So that's just saying, and this is from the Old Town dining guidelines, they're saying that a minimum of 44 inches opening must be present. So that wouldn't be an additional 44 inches coming out from the already fenced area. That's just to allow.
No, not 44. Yes, sorry. And 40, so that wouldn't allow for this.
Right, no, sir. That's just for the opening to get into the gated area, to the fenced off area. As you see there. So it's saying that opening there must be a minimum of 44 inches. That doesn't allow an additional 44 inches out.
Wait a minute, let's back up. So let's say you have a fire truck pull up between two patios, patio here and patio there. All right, they open up the doors. And so where's the additional 44 inches that you're talking?
So if we look here, and this is just from the Old Town guidelines, it's saying that, so here is your ingress egress, your way that must remain unobstructed, 16 feet. And this is the establishment. This is your fenced off area. It's saying that your opening into the fenced off area must be a minimum of 44 inches. That does not allow an additional 44 inches out into the public right of way from what's already being used. You're limited to 15 feet from the front of the building outwards.
Right. So I guess we're talking about two different things.
Okay.
I'm talking about the mall itself. So you have two patios. I'm not talking about the opening of the fence. So maybe I got a little confused there. But is there enough space for a fire apparatus to pull up between two patios, open up their door, or open up whatever they need to open up, and the firefighters to maneuver around to do what they have to do?
Based on that 16-foot requirement, there should be enough space to get an apparatus in based on, an 8-foot wide, 8 to 10-foot wide vehicle, and then their jacks and the doors. That I can't give you an exact number as to why that number was established, but I can speak with the fire marshal and to get assurance from him as to if the 16 feet will suffice. I mean, as it is now, a fire apparatus can pull up in front of any of the business where there's fences on both sides and would still be able to set up. I can't speak of a specific case in mind because I'm not aware of any, but I would imagine that 16 feet was established for that reason. And I'm not sure if Mr. Eisenach has any reference on that, but I can check on that and confirm that.
Yeah, well, there were a couple of instances, and Perry can add to it. So the 15 feet from the building was established for a reason, because you had certain businesses who had narrow space encroaching further out into the mall. So if you were to look down the mall, you would see more or less like a zigzag crooked effect, where you have some that were out 2 feet longer, where they are 17, 16, and what we did one morning, like 7 o'clock in the morning, fire chief and everybody was down. We literally went down and we had to measure the space from the building so that people were in, they were within the acceptable limits. Perry, if you want to add to that.
Sure. No, the 16 feet came when we were doing the design of the pedestrian mall changes. There was many discussions with fire and rescue, and they agreed to that 16 feet. They originally wanted like 50 feet. I'm just joking. They always want as much room as they can get, but that was an agreed. They were fully on board with that, so there was multiple discussions on that at the time.
If I may.
Yes.
You don't have to worry about me letting anything that you allow me to do lapse like those last guys did, because I've already put the fence up. But
Yes, I saw it.
the fence, to meet ABC standards, can literally be a ribbon.
Yep.
You know, so if the fence, if it were designated, the fence has to look like that, you could completely eliminate the tunnel effect. You know, that's, you know, one possibility to eliminate that. The other thing about the fire truck and what have you, I would hope if my property is on fire, I bought aluminum fence intentionally, because you can just grab that stuff and it goes. And I would hope that the fire department would do that. But we're about 18 feet between us and Violino's, I think, their fence. So there's, you know, there's plenty of room. But like I said, if you'd approve a different type of fence, or if you wanted to approve a different type of fence, we could do that too.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, and thanks for that, because that's kind of what I was thinking is, so there's not currently anything that says a fence can only be so high. It basically could be 6 feet, 8 feet.
No, it can only be 48 inches high for the dining areas.
So, because I know that there's a couple of businesses down there that the fence, it must be,
Well, their grandfather did.
it must be 24 inches or something. I just know when the building looks great, and the work that you've done is beautiful, it's beautiful. But I know when the fence, because I walk my dog down there all the time, when the fence went up, it was very distinct. It was that canyon tunnel. I mean, I felt between the two restaurants now, I feel like, you know, the area is getting smaller. And so, but I don't feel like that, again, recognizing that there's a fence here, there's not a fence here. But when they're lower, it just seems like it's a less invasive closing off kind of feel. So, I mean, I don't have an issue with this. I mean, it seems to kind of make sense. I mean, I'd like it if we didn't have to have any fences, just to have everything kind of open. So that's just my point, is the height.
And I can answer that question. So there is a separate guiding document. That's the Old Town Winchester Outdoor Dining Guidelines. And they do have a minimum requirement of 36 inches, not to exceed 48 inches. However, that's not in the zoning ordinance. So it's a separate guiding document. I'm sure it has, you know, some standing, but, you know, from the purview of the zoning ordinance, you know, 48 inches seems to be the standard. I can look into that, see if there's any additional guidance, but that, again, that's just from the guidelines established in Old Town. So,
One thing that the ABC allows you to do is have temporary drinking areas. You know, like we fence off the parking lot with blue ribbon, and we can have a party in the parking lot. You know, I could put a temporary fence up there that is, you know, a ribbon type fence, or, you know, the stanchions that you roll a thing out and hook them. You could do something like that. And that would be, but that would have to be approved by you guys, you know. But if the canyon effect is a real problem, I can mitigate that if I'm allowed to.
Yeah, question? I'm happy to see that you're willing to work with us, but at the same time, I know that you need to have a patio there, and your patio does serve as, especially where you are, it serves as a deterrent for some activity.
Yeah, there hasn't been any sleeping bags recently.
Right, but it does serve as a deterrent, which I appreciate. And I remember when this document for the Old Town was written, I was part of that, but I was kind of surprised that just wanted I just want the mall to continue to have that open effect and a welcoming effect, but at the same time serve your needs as well. And there will be others that have come along that will be opening up restaurants and bars and what have you, and that will be looking at this again.
But however, I think that we should welcome more restaurants and bars
Yes.
because it's way more revenue for everybody.
All right. Unless there's any other questions, I've got a few myself. So we're here because it's a privately sponsored text amendment. And I recognize the unique condition of your building. And that's kind of what we're focused on. This text amendment would change the opportunity for all buildings in the primary and secondary district. In this particular case, I'm afraid of the wording in the current text is it's limited to the frontage or the width of the frontage of the building. Meaning, if I've got a 30-foot wide building, but I've got a 40-foot wide parcel, can I slide the 30 feet in this direction?
Based on how it's written out, it says cannot exceed the width of the individual storefront, so it's limited.
Is this exceeding the width of the storefront, or is this going beyond the width of the storefront? To me, that's kind of semantic, but
It's about the width of the storefront because I moved it all the way into that
sure, because
control box.
you've got a number of impediments there that are limiting your utilization in front of your storefront or building. Not trying to make this specific solution to this by a skewed interpretation of it, but how about a skewed interpretation of it?
There is that option, but based on how zoning staffs interpret it, it's limited to building frontage, and so this way, it would say to width of storefront or width of lot fronting the assessment district. And so that way it sets it clear. In a situation where your lot is as wide as your building, well then if it is as wide as your building front, you're taken care of. But in a situation where you had a lot that was wider than the building, it would also address that.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm trying to take this approach is my concern is the risk of unintended consequences. You make this zoning text change, we recognize it's not going to affect a ton of properties, but there will be a number of them that it could impact. And then you ask yourself, well, what if? So that's why I'm kind of wondering in this scenario, if it's shall not exceed the width of the frontage of it, or shall not extend beyond the frontage, to me are the two where this thing tips. And I kind of look at it and this isn't scaled and we're not pulling a tape measure, but I would imagine your fence is about or less than the frontage of your building.
Very close.
And in this case, because you got a corner lot that fronts on fronts on the primary, then is Piccadilly considered secondary?
A portion of it is, let me pull that up for reference here. Once you get, basically once you get on either side of the walking wall of property down in the blue, you're right outside into the secondary assessment district.
Okay.
And so that has separate provisions. Obviously, because of the limited space, you're basically limited to a very narrow sidewalk.
Right.
That would
So in this case, you got a corner lot that's got frontage on the secondary district as well as the primary district.
Right.
So just, again, I don't have a problem with it in general. I'm just concerned about that risk of unintended consequences of can we solve this particular applicant's issue by that interpretation?
That's something that staff will look into. Again, my interpretation was firm on it. It said with an individual storefront. So that was my interpretation.
Okay. All right. I mean, again, I get it. I think the change in the ordinance as proposed again, would solve your issue and not present a challenge in my view. I see no reason not to do it. It's that risk of the unintended consequences at other locations where this is. So, I mean, probably the biggest property that would have frontage on the primary district, but also a much wider lot, is the Felder building, Shenandoah's building. If that were to convert and become a restaurant on the ground floor, you have not only the width of that fairly wide building, but the extent of the parking lot all the way to the bus gallery crossing.
Right. I do believe, and I'll check on this, I do believe that that is comprised of multiple parcels. That site is comprised of multiple parcels. So, you know, in a very literal interpretation, if you get into the width of the building that the lot is on, they would be limited to the width of the lot that the building is on, not adjoining lots that they own that also happen to front the Loudon Street walking.
Okay. So it's not about the ownership of the parcel, it's the parcel itself.
Exactly. Otherwise, yes, you know, you say, especially, you know, in that situation and other situations along the walking mall, for example, where Willie Sutton's is at now, where number 15 is at, Rouse Avenue, they also own that separate lot, but there's no building situated on it. So in effect there, what could be done is they had an outdoor seating area, but on the property itself, not on the walking mall fronting that vacant property, would be zoning staff's interpretation.
Okay, and so back to the Felder building, so if a future owner of both parcels or the current owner sought to vacate the property line and merge the parcels, this would have to be a consideration.
Correct.
So if they wanted to merge the parcels for some development requirement, they could be prevented from doing that for fear that they would do too large of a patio?
I don't know that that is a condition that could be imposed on that based on that. It's not a conditional approval, so it would be written as is, and that definitely is a what-if scenario that is possible. But being that wouldn't, a primary and secondary assessment use district is not a conditional approval per se, so I don't believe that the use of the walking mall right-of-way could be denied because they consolidated a lot, and there would be fear, or not fear, but I guess fear of unintended consequences that could occur after that. So I don't know that it can be a conditional approval like that. Does that make sense?
Any other questions?
Yeah, you just brought up a good point that you brought up an example. Okay, Willie Sutton's.
Yes, sir.
So you were talking about if the Felder building, which is several different parcels,
I believe so, yes, sir.
and Willie Sutton's, which is, I believe, 2 parcels.
Yes, sir.
But they have taken one of the parcels that's not being used for a restaurant and added the cafe, well, patio, I should say.
Yes, sir.
How is that allowable?
So in that situation, and that's number 15, just south of number 15, you can see Rouse Avenue. They actually, or not Willie Sutton himself, but they're the owner of the building and the lot actually owns that lot. It's not a public right of way. I don't believe there's any easements there either that require them to give the city any other individual access over their property. So in that situation, it's a vacant lot that's adjoining the Willie Sutton site. So that would be approved as a true outdoor dining area on private property.
Which lot are you talking about? The one on Rouse?
Right, so
That's not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about the one that's actually on the mall.
Okay.
That's next to Willie Sutton. It used to be the William Bowser building.
Oh, the Clouser building.
The Clouser building.
That's the bank, where the ATM was
Yes.
at?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's being used for patio seating,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no food or alcohol being served out of that building.
Okay. So.
And that's a separate parcel.
Right, and so when staff recently spoke with Willie Sons, and they amended their ZUP to include that portion of the building as part of their business for Willie Sons next door. So even though it's on two separate parcels, the use is the same within a small portion along the front of that building, where the ATM was before.
Well, I have both parcels on either side.
Right, and so in this situation, in that situation, Willie Sons has the same use on both parcels that are immediately adjoining each other, and so that's why as the
But
zoning
it's not
district.
the same use. There's one that's being used as an office space, and then there's one directly in front of it. Let's take my buildings down here on Water Street, for example.
Okay.
There are 3 different parcels. They're all being used for restaurants. There's kitchen, dining room, and there's 2 dining rooms in the kitchen at the restaurant where the patios are.
Okay.
But there's no office building there with the patio. However, so if you take Monument, that whole building is being used for entertainment and restaurant, correct? All right, but there's, so with Willie Sutton's, you have the restaurant portion, and then the space, and then you have the office space. But then there's patio in front of the office.
Okay. I see.
How is that possible?
So when staff looked at that, it was, again, being that the use was spread out and it was within that same storefront, within the same building front, staff approved it as that, falling in that same building front, being that unique extension of their use on the opposite side, technically a separate parcel, but of the same use. And so that's how that was approved.
Sean, did you want to offer some insight?
I apologize. On the north side of that building, the Clouser building itself,
Mhm.
there is actually a restaurant opening on that north side. That's why there's a break in between to give access to the office entry. But the new doors that were created on Loudon Street, that's actually a restaurant entrance that's been created, and there's a restaurant opening in that space. So it'll be 2 separate entities that look similar, but that's the reason there's a separation between the 2. I hope that clears that up.
Okay, so we just put the cart before the horse.
Correct.
From the standpoint of what, creating the outdoor space before the use is in place?
Yes.
Correct. It is being finalized right now, but I think they preemptively applied for it for that use.
Okay, if I may. All right, so if you take a look at Boscawen Street now. So I know that during COVID, the broken glass, they were looking for patio space, but they weren't permitted to be on the sidewalk. And that, but, so where does their lot end?
Staff can look into that. I know that there was a unique situation there because I'm not sure if a part of their building or a part of that site, part of it's in the primary assessment district, which is your red, and then a portion of it is within the secondary district. And so when you transition from the 2,
They are in the primary district.
yeah. And so that was before my time. I'm not sure what all the circumstances were regarding that permit. That's something that staff can look into, but
That was
So that same street, before you go.
Okay.
No, before you say something. So further down where you have the pizza place and Sexy Mexi, same situation.
that those were simply COVID era allowances. They were emergency allowances that they were given. under this scenario, that is not at all related to this scenario. Those
So
are
they
not,
can't have
no.
a patio.
No, that is a public right-of-way. It's sidewalk. It has to be kept clear. There is, if you can keep the minimum distance on the sidewalk for pedestrians, you can have limited seating, but that's already in place, not associated with this. That was completely a
Right.
COVID allowance.
Right, then I understand.
Yes.
So, here you have a business or a building that changed use. Let's talk about the broken glass that
Okay.
changed use, and it's a restaurant, brew pub, what have you, and they have space that is in front of them, but that's public use, so they can't have it.
Well, under the secondary assessment district, they would be able to use the building, provided that they maintain minimum clearance. So I'm not sure if they were to do it now, if they have enough space, but they would work on staff and them provide guidance on whether they meet that minimum 3-foot clearance and still be able to provide table and chairs for their
3-foot
clients.
clearance.
Minimum 3-foot clearance.
So Sexy Mexi and the pizza place, their sidewalk is a lot wider, so they could do that. So if I wanted to have patios spaced down mine as well on Water Street, that shrinks everything.
Your space, that particular space is
It's
narrower
smaller.
than Benny's and Sexy Mexi have a wider
Wider
side.
side.
I think there's an extra 2 feet.
So are they able to set up a patio out in front of theirs if they wanted to?
With the proper approvals in place? Yes, sir.
And not subject to pandemic waiver.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. But this would not apply to them.
Right.
at all.
Yeah. We're,
They don't know.
yeah. So back to this privately sponsored text amendment. Let's focus on that and any questions we might have towards that, or see how we want to act on this. I mean, our options here are to, we need to either move it on or continue it. And then we can move it on with a recommendation to approve or deny.
I don't have a problem with moving it on. I would like for staff to take a look at the patio fencing, because in the future, we may have a situation where we end up, like you said, with more restaurants, and then you're definitely going to have a tunnel effect. And I know on the planning commission that this was approved with 6-1, with one voting no because of that. And that is a concern of mine. And I know when this mall was created, it was like a park-like open effect, and everybody was so excited about it. I would just hate to see it minimized now. So.
I would completely echo that. I think the fencing needs to come down. I know we can't, grandfathered in, and it is what it is, but I think as more and more, and looking at all these
You're talking about
restaurants.
height.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
The height, whatever.
Yeah, as they started to pop up, it wasn't as significant, but if you start looking at these maps and all the potential places, or all these numbers that could potentially have patios, some of them already do, and they're less of you don't really see them as much because the fencing's really low, so I think this is fine, but
Well, there's a-
whatever it takes to
You're
look
saying that's not
forward.
that is not an ordinance or part of the ordinance. That's part of the design guidelines for outdoor dining on the mall?
Right, so what I'm trying to say, or what I tried to explain, is that the zoning ordinance does make reference to the outdoor guidelines. I don't know that these outdoor guidelines are codified. They may be, staff can look in.
Yeah, if I can, because it's a private application, it needs to be judged on that. This particular application really only applies to
Yeah.
empty properties, but a lot of the discussion is referencing these guidelines. So if we could split the motion with a motion to move it forward with whatever the will of the committee is, and then the second part of the motion be for staff to bring back an updated analysis of the fencing issues, we talked about ABC a little bit. I think those guidelines have changed. It might be time to look at that anyway. So if it's a dual motion with staff moving back direction and then forwarding this with whatever recommendation that
Does it
would
require a motion from us to just seek that input?
I always like
Yeah,
staff
yeah.
direction to put in
Okay.
motion, so just split the motion and I'm good.
So we have two motions then.
Yeah.
So let's do one at a time. How do we want to handle the privately sponsored text amendment in front of us?
Motion to do that one first.
Yeah.
I make a motion to approve the private sponsor amendment.
All right?
Or a recommendation
A
to
motion to
forward with
forward
approval?
Yes.
with recommendation for
Yes.
approval as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then we're going to consider an additional,
Another motion
Motion.
to look at the guidelines specifically addressing the fencing.
okay, and that was a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, I agree with you. The fencing down Loudon Street, some of it's in bad shape, some of it's in good shape. There's all different types, what have you. I think that we should come together and specify a fence, a height that's a single bar, that's got a post every 8 feet. Or the city comes in and puts in pylons, and the owner can stretch a rope or something between them. So all of them are the same, all of them are the same height. There's no tunnel effect. It meets the ABC requirement, but we do it classy. You know, would solve all of these problems.
I could.
To be honest with you.
All right, so we have a motion to request staff review the guidelines for fencing the outdoors.
To review and come with recommendations.
Sure. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate the efforts of staff towards that. Last on our agenda, resolution approving an updated sidewalk master plan.
A motion to approve.
Good to see you. I've got some questions. Okay.
I gotta get dressed.
I know you do.
You know how long that takes.
And we still have a quorum with 2. So,
Rock and roll.
yep, let's do this. Barry, what do you got?
Okay, well, thank you. The first sidewalk master plan we did was back in 2013. Then it was updated in 2017 and approved by council. So now it's time to do another update. So that's what we're here to talk about. So,
All right.
thank you, sir. So I think the best thing to do is just go through the drawings that are in the plan. So the first drawing shows existing sidewalks. We have about 140 miles of sidewalks right now. Unfortunately, a large percentage of those are in poor condition. And so that's figure 2. A little over a third of our sidewalks are in poor condition. Now, we have made a big dent in this, but we still have a lot to do. If we were to replace all these poor condition sidewalks today with the dramatic cost increase that has happened with construction costs the past 2 years, it's just shot through. It's crazy. But we'd be looking at about 40 million just to replace 40 million.
What was it pre-COVID? 10? 20?
20, 25. So unfortunately, that's working against us. So figure 3, this shows the sidewalk, the new sidewalks, replacements, and even new sidewalks were non-existent that we've done since 2007, so the last 15 years.
And Perry, just to confirm that the existing sidewalks in poor condition is poor defined by criteria and established by staff.
Yes,
Okay, we deem this to be poor.
Yes, we walk every sidewalk, and
Okay,
it's a physical observation. Yes.
all right.
Yep. So we've done a lot of sidewalks since 2007, over 40 miles. It's a lot of sidewalks. It's a lot of sidewalks. We still have a lot more to do.
Okay.
Figure 4, this shows the areas where there are no sidewalks. The two biggest areas are kind of in the northwest part of the city and then down in the southern part of the city. Those are areas that were annexed back in the 70s that didn't have sidewalks. The other big area that you see is kind of on the west side, east of where Meadow Branch goes through. When that area was built, there was not a requirement for sidewalks.
By ordinance or by the approval of the development plan?
By the zoning ordinance and
Okay.
subdivision ordinance at that time. The sidewalks were not required until, is it 1989? I believe it was 1989. So,
Okay.
okay. So we know we still have a lot of sidewalk replacements. We would love to be able to go do them all next year if we could. We don't have $40 million. So that's why we have this master plan to prioritize those. So what you see here in figure 5, these are our recommended replacements for the next 5 years. So what's in kind of the yellowish, orangish color, we already have the funding set up for those. The ones in blue, that will rely upon funding in the FY24 CIP that you will see a year from now. So that's not written in stone yet, but in our priority system, the way we look at these, the highest priority are major streets that have a lot of pedestrian traffic. And we have addressed the vast majority of those. Then we look at locations near schools, other high pedestrian areas. And the lowest priority are just residential areas. We are finally now getting into just the residential areas. So I think we've taken care of a lot of the high priority ones. And now we're getting into some of these more residential areas, which is a good thing. Any questions on figure 5? These figure 6 shows what will still be left in the future. We have not come up with a proposed schedule for these just because of the funding. We just don't know what the funding is going to be available. I will say that, and I don't want anybody to get their hopes up, we are going to pursue as much federal infrastructure money as we can for sidewalks. Hopefully we'll be successful, but there really hasn't been details released from the feds yet on how that is going to work, but we are certainly going to pursue it as much as we can.
I Have my hopes up.
We're pulling for you.
Thank you. Okay, the last figure here. So these are the areas that need new sidewalks. We have prioritized what we see as the highest need, and we've actually, this is how we currently have them prioritized. Number 1 is Middle Road. Number 2 is Paper Mill Road.
In order.
In order.
Okay.
Yeah, these are in order. 3 is Fox Drive, 4 is Williams Lane, 5 is Bellevue Avenue. The cost for just those 5 projects alone is about $40 million, because there's drainage work, there's curb movement. It's not just the sidewalks. The sidewalk portion of it is certainly a lot less than $40 million, but we do the whole project. So,
And then right-of-way work? I mean, right-of-way acquisition?
Generally speaking, these areas have enough right-of-way. There may have to be some temporary construction easements in some locations, but generally speaking, there is right-of-way available. So we have already received some funding for Middle Road from VDOT, so that's in the pipeline. We've applied for money for Paper Mill Road, so we're working on that. But these are big projects. So I've gone through that very, very quickly, but
The mayor appreciates that. Dave, do you have any questions?
I don't actually. I'm just glad to see that we're continuing on the work with the sidewalks. And it seems like every time we fix a portion of the sidewalks and start working on another one, then you gotta go back and fix the other, which you just got finished, a few years later.
it's never ending.
I know. Well, the good thing is, those who have sidewalks, we have sidewalks. And, but then there's a lot who don't have sidewalks.
Yeah.
So. That's
Dale,
all.
you have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for updating this, and as the mayor just said, you do some and then you gotta go back and do it. I think that the sidewalks that do get done, I mean, Valley looks great, the other sidewalks in Kent, I mean, once they're done, they look amazing. I know the one that I keep bringing up and have brought up for several years now is Paper Mill. And I know you guys, you talked about that you, as far as prioritizing, you look at the major streets with pedestrians and then locations to school and residential areas. Do you also look at, because one of the concerns I have with Paper Mill is it is very unsafe. Like,
It is.
it's not like you're walking along the side of the road, you are walking in a ditch. So do you look at that from the standpoint of prioritization? Because it just seems like that is such an unsafe. I mean, they're all Weems and Mill Road, and they're unsafe, but when and I see kids, out there getting the bus, and moms with their strollers trying to walk along the road, and I mean, it's a challenge, and I know residents that I've talked with along there, it's supposed to be 25 miles, and, people don't go 25 miles, it's 30, 35 rooms.
Yeah. I agree completely with you. Paper Mill is very dangerous. That's why it's ranked number 2, and it's ahead of Fox Drive, Weems Lane. Because, for example, say Fox Drive, there's at least shoulders
Right.
on the road,
Yeah.
where Paper Mill
There's
doesn't
nothing.
doesn't have that.
Yeah.
Middle Road is in some areas is similar to Paper Mill. There's really not any place to walk, and that has been the highest priority based on council maybe 5-6 years ago. That was a very high priority. That's why we have pursued that funding, and that funding is pretty much in place.
So what's, I know it's hard to put a timeline to this, but, I mean, what's your sense of the, figure 7, proposed new sidewalks? And the prioritization, the high priority project, I mean, even if you just look at the high priority ones, what's your sense on when you think those would be, are we looking at 2027, is that what you said?
For Middle Road, we're looking at like 2024, 2025.
Okay,
Paper Mill would be like 2026, 2027.
okay, and that's providing that the funding is there.
Yes.
Do you have a sense of, how much is Middle Road, how much would all of Middle Road
Middle Road is
cost?
about a $6 to $7 million.
And then how much would all of Paper Mill cost?
The entire project itself is about 14 million
Wow,
with utilities and
yeah,
everything.
because it's a lot.
Yeah. And Paper Mill, there's gonna have to be a lot of retaining walls built
Yeah,
because the properties kind of sit up,
Mhm.
yeah,
road's a lot lower.
yeah,
That's gonna be challenging.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you guys did a really good job on Kent Street,
Yeah.
doing that, so that's.
Kent and Valley, because Valley's kind of in the same place.
Yeah.
There's different places where you have to cut in and do a retaining wall. Not as much as this, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, it needed to be updated. It's great. I know money's limited, but the prioritization and stuff that you've got, I think makes sense.
All right, well, the concept of our work on sidewalks reminds me of the painting crew that's tasked with painting the Golden Gate Bridge, as they start at one end and they paint across, and when they get done, they go back to the other side and start over.
True.
And that's real, yeah. I think it's also very helpful, as you've pointed out, those areas in our community that don't have sidewalks, those neighborhoods that were, because they were not Frederick County standards prior to annexation. So the reality is we kind of inherited that requirement. Those areas that were within the city when they were approved development plans that don't have sidewalks, yeah, we'll get to that.
Yep.
So because these things are, I mean, it's not just aesthetics and it's not just pedestrian safety. This kind of plays into stormwater as well, right?
Very much so.
So I know that's kind of a coupled issue with a lot of neighborhoods, is the concerns about stormwater and certain properties that we're aware of. So I think that's helpful to address those and can kind of play into the calculus of prioritization and how things are done. So did we not have an in-house crew? We have an in-house crew that does flat work?
We have an in-house crew that does concrete.
Yeah, but this is not. This is,
Yeah, I can tell you that several years ago, we proposed an in-house sidewalk crew. And I think there was a lot of interest. But at the
In-house
time,
sidewalk, or somebody that walks the sidewalk?
what's that?
Somebody that walks the sidewalks?
the city staff that actually were on salary.
Right, a construction
Construction crew that did nothing but sidewalks.
But don't we have something similar to that in this budget?
Last budget, we created an in-house utility crew
Right.
to do similar model, which we just brought in, rather than contracting out, we brought in folks specifically to do utility construction for us. We could do the same for sidewalks if the council wanted to.
Not at this scale. I don't think you do it at this
It
scale.
would,
It'd be a small.
I think because we have so many of these small residential areas, we can just take them in pieces. I think it would save the city a lot of money.
Mhm.
especially as we're looking at the possible stormwater fee,
Mhm.
because of as Perry mentioned, a lot of this has to do with stormwater.
Right.
And drainage. Not every
Capture
sidewalk
direction.
project will fall into
Right.
that category, but we could, in theory, fund some of these improvements with the stormwater fee.
Yeah.
And at that point, I would probably bring you a recommendation to bring some of that in-house. If we've got a consistent revenue stream, looking at the preliminary numbers as to what that would bring in after our complete about a month ago. And
Mhm.
I think it's very likely I would bring back a proposal for an in-house team.
That'd be great.
It would be a lot more efficient, but obviously things, something like Mill Road or Paper Mill, that's
Big,
something
yeah,
you
big
want-
projects,
yeah.
we're not gonna be set up in-house to do big projects.
Sure.
But smaller size ones, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I certainly appreciate the effort in doing this, and the maps are very telling and instructional. I would encourage citizens to kind of look at the maps. You know, I know you guys have not just arbitrarily said this priority, I like this one better. So there's a lot of consideration in it. So I would, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Make a recommendation or make a recommendation to forward
Recommendation for approval?
for approval, yeah.
Okay. I have a motion to forward this to council with the recommendation for approval. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that will go to the council at a future meeting.
First meeting in May?
Yeah.
Why not? That's up to you.
It is up to me.
Just
All right.
that one, just so it's that amazing. Do you?
Want a motion to adjourn, or do you have any other business before the
No.
committee?
No.
Well, then let's vote to get out of here so David
Motion
can
to
go get
adjourn.
dressed. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are gone.
Thank you all.
Have fun, David.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy.